Going live. Hello, I'm Dr. Lenore Walker, and I'm chairing the APA Division 56's COVID Task Force. We're trying to deal with all of the psychological issues that arise from experiencing this pandemic that we've been experiencing for going on close to 10 months now, almost 11 months. For all of us, learning how to live a new life, I guess. And our particular group deals with what's happening with violence, interpersonal violence in particular. And Dr. Eileen Serlin, who is chairing the International Whole Person group, is dealing with how it affects us as a whole person. And we're alternating right now these roundtables every Thursday. And typically we introduce who's on the Zoom call. And those of you who are watching live on Facebook, we have it on our COVID IPV group page. So you can tune in there and type questions. We watch what comes in during this hour, and then we post it. So they're available if you can't stay the whole hour. You can then go back, or if you want to go back and listen to something that you heard, they should be on Facebook as well. And we're trying to get them onto the Whole Person Facebook group as well. We haven't quite figured it out yet, but we're working on that, and we're working on trying to get them onto YouTube, which we have a YouTube channel, but we don't quite have them up there yet. But I promise you we are working on them, because these roundtables are designed to give not only mental health professionals, which we originally designed it for, but also the general public. And we have people who come from all different countries. I see today we have people who are here from Israel. Dr. Marilyn Safer is here from Israel, and Dr. Eleanor Partis is here from Israel. We have Dr. Patricia Villavicencio here from Madrid, Spain. And we have our presenters as well, who are here from California, along with Dr. Serlin, who's going to introduce them directly. I also see Dr. Brittany Geddes, who's almost finished with her degree. Just another couple of months, I think. And so we're excited about that. And of course, you met Dr. Giselle Gaviria when she introduced us initially. And Laurie Gill is joining us from Canada, from Niagara on the Canada. So you can see we'll have others jumping on. We never know who's going to come, and that's some of the fun of working on these roundtables. For those of you who want to stay on, we're going to 15 minutes after we end at 1 o'clock Eastern time, we're going to have a 15-minute conversation about our next month's schedule. And at the end of this webinar, I'll tell you what we already know we're going to have, including think about Valentine's Day coming up. We're going to plan something really special to show our love for ourselves, as well as our fellow men and women in this world, and creatures, all creatures in this world. We just learned as we were getting ready that it's a holiday in Judaism and Israel, Tu B'Shvat, where we celebrate the growth of trees and nature. And I see Larry Graber's got his nature and his background. And of course, you see I'm here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I do indeed look out at the ocean and the palm trees. So let's get the show on the road. We have a wonderful presentation today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Serlin, and she is going to introduce our panelists. And when they are going to just give us some ideas to think about, and then we're all going to jump in. And I hope those of you who are watching jump in as well. If you're on Facebook Live, type in communication. If you enjoy it enough that you want to join a Zoom call, send us a back channel and we'll send you the links. So with that, Dr. Serlin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. Here we are again, much fun, and happy birthday to the trees. Happy birthday, everyone. And as I've learned, we can't say good morning. It's good morning in California, good evening, good night to the rest of you where you are in the world. I'm chair of, we call our committee the International Whole Person Approaches. Many of us are both psychologists, but also somatic creative arts therapists. We work with all kinds of modalities to work with trauma. And we've been really facing the fact that so many people are zoomed out. Just looking at the effects of COVID and the new use of Zoom and technologies and what that does to us. So among all the traumas, we have problems like we hear a lot from. I'm a grandmother who can't hug her grandchildren, and people living alone and not being touched, and different forms of human communication. We're hearing a lot about loneliness and isolation and depression, and so forth. So we're trying to help with kind of re-embodiment, how to bring us back to ourselves, feeling good, feeling whole. We have two excellent presenters today who are devoted really their careers to it. First, we'll have Dr. Eric Pepper, who is the chair of holistic health at San Francisco State. He's just written a new book called Tech Stress, which gives both evidence and practical things that you can do to help you unzoom your Zoom fatigue or unfatigue your Zoom fatigue. And we have almost Larry Graeber below him, who, as you can see, is almost always in nature and is going to be able to talk about what we can do to re-embody ourselves after staring at Zoom much of the day and being sitting or being indoors. So with that, I'll turn it over. Dr. Eric Pepper, please.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's such a pleasure to be here. And as I was thinking our short discussion about the day in Israel of the sap rising, I do realize that we are all like trees. We are rooted in the earth. We're reaching upward into the sky. And then and we are buffeted by storms, and yet we survive. And if we can keep that image in our mind, it does better. So even as you're just checking in, just be like a tree. Just bring your arms way up for a moment. Really reach up and just feel yourself being buffeted by the trees back and forth. Move for a moment. It's unimportant. You can rotate, do something. Move your fingers like the leaves being brushed by the wind. And then just let your arms just drop as it's getting quieter. In terms of PTSD or COVID or anything, we have to remember that body and mind emotions are not separate. That's the whole underlying theme. They're really the same thing. And if we can affect our emotions, we can affect our thoughts by body changes and vice versa. Every thought and emotion as a body experience and vice versa. And one of the themes we so often forget is the importance of body affecting emotions. And so I wanted to think of that as a system perspective. And I'll do one suggestion about food, because we know that when people tend to get anxious, if their blood sugar is low, and then if they breathe more quickly, they're more likely to get anxious or whatever. And we all have that English term called hangry, but that is about how you interpret that state really means what emotional label you give it. It will trigger whether it's anxiety, panic attacks, or dropping in. So one of the basic rules I give when I work with students or others or clients is I'll call grandmother therapy. And that is eating 3 meals a day and have much less pure sugars, which is what so many of us start crashing at home now, isolated by ourselves, eating sweets. If I can just change that in the morning and have more protein, whether that's nuts or an egg, whatever is your dietary piece, you'll modulate that biological phenomena inside you and you'll be a little bit lower risk. The second part is when we worry. The evolutionary perspective of our immune system suggests that when we are safe, then our immune system is most effective against viruses, by the way, not against bacteria or not against when we get an injury. When we feel danger, Then our immune system becomes activated for inflammation because by definition, there's injury. It needs to be inflamed to start healing and protecting. So the key is, how can I feel safe? When I'm safe, I optimize my health. And we know it's so challenging because when I worry or something triggers me, a memory that drops me into that past event, I freeze or I hold. And it's very hard to stop our thoughts, at least for me and for my students. We just go, brrr. It's almost like what we do when we are searching on the internet or whatever. We go from one link to another and all of a sudden an hour has passed. Our brain almost works that way, the same way negatively. So by telling yourself to stop, to stop thinking is challenging. It's much easier at times to use the body and reconnect and get safe. So let me do one very simple practice which I find very helpful for people. One, if you feel agitated, for a moment, do some physical activity. It makes no difference what. Just move in place. Just do it for a moment. Just move in place. And bring your attention to the movement. Now, if you had music present, it would even be more fun. That's good enough. Now just sit quietly. And you may still feel agitated. That's very normal. And now what I'd like you to do is just bring your right hand to your left shoulder. And then take a big breath. Let's let your stomach expand as you inhale. And then as you exhale, maybe make a sound like pss, pss, as you exhale. And then as the air goes out, stroke your arm hard. So you're stroking the arm as you exhale from your shoulder to your fingers, while you can imagine the air flows right through the arm as if they're straws. Do it again. Bring your right arm on your left shoulder. And now, as you exhale, take a breath in. And as you exhale, stroke down your arm and past your hands, and your hands are on your thighs as you exhale. Do it a third time. And now shift to your other arm. With your left hand, bring it onto your shoulder. Take a breath. And then stroke down your arms. As if you could imagine, and do it again. Take a breath. Bring your hands to your shoulders, stroke down. And just imagine the air flows out through your arms and out your fingers. Let's do it a third time. And then include your legs, put your hands on your hips. And then take a breath in. And as you exhale, stroke down from your hips, down your thighs, past your knees, as far as you can, down your feet, pressing down the legs. And as you're down, now gently inhale again. Get up, almost arch, look up, and then put your hands back on the hips. And once again, and then once again, come back up. The hands on the hips. And gently come back up. Lean back in your chair as if you can almost look slightly upward with your eyes closed. And at this moment, with your hands resting on your thighs, keep imagining that air can just keep flowing down your arms each time you exhale. So when you inhale, let the stomach get larger. When you exhale, imagine the air flowing down your arms, out your hands. And on the next breath, imagine flowing down your legs and out your feet. And then just imagine, as you're doing this, that you really are just like a tree. you're sitting, and all the time you're reaching up to the light to grow. And just check how you feel. Do you feel slightly quieter inside? Do you feel slightly more sensation in your arms and legs? Did you interrupt your worrying thoughts for a moment? And if the answer is yes, just nod your head. Great. And what is so interesting when we do this as research with our students, and we have done it with hundreds of students in different ways, when people worry and you ask them to do more, to just change their internal language using cognitive therapy and reframing, you can ask how effective that is. And all we then do is we compare half the group just doing that practice versus when you change your posture, where you sit up, look up, take a breath, and then change your thoughts. A very simple exercise, but it's the incorporation of body versus just sitting in the chair. And I want to just share how impressive that data looks with the students, because it is truly, to me, one of the more impressive findings we found. So I'll show you this on this slide. I think you can all see this, I hope. And what you can see is we pair the students up. Like I said, half the students just do the cognitive therapy. The other half do the simple body posture change and breathing. Then we flip them around. So it's a controlled study. When they do the posture breath, they find it much more effective in reducing their negative thoughts, anxiety, and tension. It's a momentary measure than just when they're trying to change their language. It truly is impressive. If I took this when you look at how much is the difference, it would look like this. These are the measures of negative thoughts, that's blue. Anxiety and tension is the orange. And this is how much more the tension is reduced. You can see when you do posture and breathing, you reduce your tension and negative thoughts significantly more than the other way. It's the same kind of data, but here you see this absolute. This is unbelievably significant, and we have published this as an article, and we did it collaboratively with Danny Hamil from Israel, Rick Harvey at San Francisco State, and myself. And if I summarize these findings, at least, I mean, I could look at the language of this. This is the most interesting part that people would say. It's too small a print. But if you just do the reframing, they would say, after changing my internal language, I still felt the same thoughts. The same person, I instantly felt better about my situation after adjusting my posture. Here's another one. Difficulty time changing language. My posture and breathing helped me made it easier to change my language. It's truly impressive. It's very quick, but it gives people a momentary shift to move towards safety. Because when you touch yourself, when you breathe, and when you change your posture, you interrupt that automatic pattern, and it gives hope. In summary for this, I think what I would then recommend, that when we do get caught in our thoughts, do include the body. It allows us for a moment to distract. We all know this. We feel sad or whatever, and somebody just touches us. And at that moment, our thoughts are interrupted and become aware of the touch. Now, obviously, it depends how you do this. And so in summary, the key for health and a component to improve our own health is to feel more safe. Here's just a short moment to bring a moment of safety to yourself. Thank you. I know, Elaine?
Yes, very much. And I'm reminded to sit up as I now introduce our next speaker. That's Larry Graeber, who's going to also continue this, as we can see the real importance of bringing the body in to all this work that we're doing. And I think we'll learn more from Larry now.
Okay, and I got to share my screen, so I just hit the share screen thing, right? Where is that?
You want to hit share screen, then select on that your specific file.
I got moved down.
And notice as everybody is waiting for Larry to share the screen, just take a breath.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. What I'm actually be talking about is how to tune into yourself and tune into the connection with your client mostly during therapy. And so I'm just going to run through a few things and try and highlight what I see as relevant, which really has to do with how you make a resonance within yourself by your own inner experience, and also feel how that resonance translates into the connection with your client. I define embodiment along with in the inactive embodied perspective, which is embodied, inactive, and embedded, which really means that inactive means that you not just in your body, but your body is communicating with others in the world, with all of the world, and is part of the world. So there's a subjective inner experience of what I experience from within, and there's also the intersubjective, how my body is resonating with, interacting with others. And that involves, especially when we're being in our bodies online or being in our bodies and connecting with anyone when they're in your office, is something that's usually referred to as paralinguistic communication or paralanguage, which is the language that's around or beside speaking words. And that has more to do with your vocal prosody, the rhythm of your voice, tonality, other factors that you're observing in somebody's body. For instance, postural movements, like Eric was talking about, which has a great effect on emotional conveyances, breathing rate, skin color, all sorts of things like that. I came up with this idea of listening with the third ear as a somatic ear. It's really sensing rhythms and feelings, and what I call the body story. The body's communicating something at the same time that we're speaking, or even when we're not speaking. Sometimes it's important to have a softer and wider vision. When I'm with a client, I'm not just looking at them and what they're saying. I am looking at them, but it's like they're in the middle of an orchestra, which is the space around them and their body moving. And I'm feeling in my own body what comes up for me as I'm making that connection. It's as if we're one body. It's also been called like one voice by some of the researchers. So that really defines the idea of the felt resonance or synchrony. Anytime there's two oscillators or something that vibrates or moves, when they come in contact with something else, whether it's mechanical or a human being, there's a recalibration where both things start to coalesce until they vibrate at one level together. It doesn't have to be in every way exactly the same. And part of that idea is what's called perception action coupling, is mostly that when we perceive, even inwardly, you sense there's movement inside. And that movement starts to move a little because you sense it, and then you perceive that, and then there's a back and forth even within you. The same thing happens when you're with other people or even in nature. You notice things, and that noticing then gives you an experience, and that experience tunes you more to what you're noticing, and there's a play back and forth, like a musical dialogue. I like to think of the body narrative path as something that is fluid. And in trauma, this path gets disrupted or sometimes stopped. And so I like to think of that there's a pathway that the body's moving through certain ranges and certain movements, and that there's a direction that that story is going with the body. So if I'm looking at a client, I'm starting to pick up on something in them that seems to be going in a direction. It may be along with what they're talking about, or it may be sort of around it or underneath it. Because I'm a musician, I often think of that as the bass rhythm. When a client walks in the door, they come in with a rhythm, and underneath that there's another rhythm, and I try and synchronize with that. So the overall message is my body, the story doesn't stop here. Whatever might be stuck, frozen, or disconnected isn't an endless loop. It can keep moving. I do want to have time for an experiential, so I'm just going to highlight some things, and this repeats some of what I said. But one of the things about being online is that people think that it's different. I mean, it is different because you can't walk around a person for me. And some people just sit when they're in their offices. But hearing, you can get a lot with hearing. The more you tune in with hearing, I did a lot of phone call consultation in the past before Zoom. You can visualize, your body gets a visual image as well as a kinesthetic sense just listening to how people breathe, how they speak. And if you, and since all of us have the same bodies, even though they're shaped differently and we have different organ issues and whatever, we have the same body. And so that image is just part of our innate anatomy and visual repertoire. One thing that I tend to look at, which I just mentioned here, are tension lines, are cues for focal awareness down at the bottom. And that might be an example like in the throat. I tend to look at and see, is there a place where energy stops or where you can see that there's a different coloration in the skin or a tension somewhere? And part of the idea is that you're kind of just helping the client to expand just the smallest step so that they can be aware of what that feels like and see if they can just move a little further past where that line is, or maybe make a connection between what's on one side or the other, or above or below. And that process of just having them tune in starts to create a shift that then after that, the body wants to go in another direction. It might expand. It might start, there might be movements in the arms a little bit, and then the movements grow. This is a whole bunch of information, and there's a couple of good articles that are out right now that are in my references from 2020 on embodiment in therapy. One's by Pat Ogden and Bonnie Goldstein, and another one is by Frank. And another one that has a good chart is Sherry Geller, the expert on presence. So one thing I want to mention here is, those will give you the pointers, how to set up your room so that you have more room to move around, so you can create different distances between you and your client. I do mention what's been mentioned here, I think in these seminars before, that between the sessions, take time. There was a study that was done that 5 minutes of pre-session mindful centering may help the therapist feel that they were more present during the session, and the clients felt they got a better experience, that it was more effective. That's in the reference section as well. I like to think that if you have time to walk around, either your home or outside, as has been suggested in other seminars, to change your eye look, to look around. And part of that's because when we're stressed, our flexors and our muscles go in and our focus gets narrow. But the other thing is to open up the eye channel. And so I like to have people look at something and then actually let themselves breathe with it. I got 2 minutes. All right, so I have to probably skip over the trauma response to do like a 3 or 4 minute little exercise if I'll have time for that. But what I wanted to emphasize in the trauma response rhythm, I drew this diagram, is that there are times when we're energized and there's times when we're shutting down, but that they can go in and out constantly during a session even. And part of our tuning in our bodies is to notice how those things come and go. And also to just emphasize that the preparatory set, how we we always prepare before we're going to make a movement. All this is unconscious, but we become aware of it. And that people in trauma that have PTSD tend to jump over orienting and being able to go and shift into a relaxed, connected social or self-engagement state at the bottom. That's the ventral vagal system of POGIS. All right, so can I do like a 2 or 3 minute thing? Okay. So just for a moment, just to tune into your bodies, just take a moment, and if you want to close your eyes, you could be sitting or standing. Just feel your body. Feel your breathing. Feel how far down your breathing goes. And feel your feet on the ground. And see if you can feel the ground feeling back or pressing back onto your feet. Just tuning into whatever's there at the moment. But then start to review anything from this last COVID year, just the sense of what it's been like to live through these times. It might be something recent or just the overview, something that brings up, and just see if you can tune in to any kind of way that registers in maybe a tension or an emptiness inside, or a feeling that you can locate in part of your body system, usually with one of those states, a state that's either erratic or heightened or frozen a little bit, or maybe blank. And when you've located that, or if you haven't, just kind of go with the experience and see what shows up. When you've located that, just let yourself experience it a little bit stronger until it starts to move. Let your body signal where it might want to move in the other direction. And see what your body can teach you about where this movement path, this body story, what's been imprinted over this year. It's a natural experience of responding to something that's threatening or stressful. And see if you can find a pathway for it to move out, away. That might be feeling like your arms moving, or just an energetic shift, or a change in your breath, or a feeling of being lighter or heavier. It's really individual. It's your experience. And see if you want to let that move. And then, when you're ready, bring it back so you can feel the pathway. Bring it back into where it once was, where it was probably more constrained or empty or blocked, and then find the pathway so you can move in and out a little bit easier. See if you can move in and out easier by defining it, even if it's just so you have an awareness. But this is one of the ways that I contact and adapt under stress that I may or may not be aware of. And that if I tune in and listen to the music in my body will know what the next thing to do is, the next direction to go. And whatever you might find that's useful from that, whatever learning might start to bleed through. And often if you contact something that's maybe been held for a long time that you weren't aware of, it opens up a new window, a new pathway, a new possibility that you can incorporate in some way during your week, month, the rest of your time. And with that, when you're ready, just reorient to yourself, feel your feet on the ground, Feel your breathing. And when you're ready, in a short amount of time, just let your eyes start to come open again if they are not now. Feel the space around you in the room and just reorient. See if you actually can connect to that orienting response where you can move around and see where you are comfortably. Because in the orienting response, our heart rate is actually less. It's a type of being still where you can move easily and check things out. Sometimes it's called stop and listen. Okay, is everybody coming back yet? Thank you. And then I guess I'll put the slideshow, I'll send it to Giselle or somebody if people want to see it. And I put a quote up here that kind of wraps this up a little bit.
Shall we, are we ready for discussion now? Larry?
Yeah.
You've left us relaxed and aware, I hope.
And how do I get, and then I stop share.
Stop share, just open it up to see what the responses are to both of these embodied, touchful exercises. What was it like to do this? Did it help
I just
mostly?
want to say thank you to both of you. This has been wonderful. This is the type of work we do as part of our practice daily. And I try to weave it in, but today's been a really busy day. So that was a real treat. So thank you for that. My body is grateful. My mind is grateful. My spirit. So thank you very much. I feel much more just embodied, looser, lighter. So very appreciative.
It's amazing how simple it can be, huh?
That's one of the things that, sorry, I'll just add quickly. That's one of the things that I always say to clients and therapists that I teach is it takes seconds, right? Sometimes when we're doing grounding work or different work with clients, we're wanting to see this long lasting shift, like sitting in for an extended period of time. But a moment is 1 to 2 seconds. So if we can shift the intensity in that moment, it's quite profound, the impact that it can have.
You know, there's an interesting, very old book by Chuck Strobel called The Quieting Reflex, which really is where all you do basically, I mean, in some ways you do, the moment you're stressed, you gently take a breath, you smile, let your shoulder, as you exhale, let your shoulders drop. And so, and when he taught that to patients, it was remarkable how many people would then, their headaches would decrease, their hypertension would decrease, their anxiety. And you can do this hundreds of times during the day.
I think one of the things we don't talk about, Eric, or I experience, is the cumulative effect of stress and anxiety over the course of a day. So I like to help clients or myself, just when you catch it, as Larry did, and you start feeling where you typically hold stress in your body, if you catch it and release it before it has time to keep accumulating throughout the day, you don't have as much trouble sleeping at night or venting your anger on others in your household because it's been accumulating all day. So if you just keep releasing it throughout the day, I think it just generally helps with the whole day.
And there's the accumulative effect of tuning into your body more, that it becomes easier.
Yeah.
And some of the things that start to shift further, a little step at a time. But you become more tuned in to notice the small changes that are actually quite big. But we tend to overlook some of those things until we get more tuned in.
Eric's presentation reminded me of a trauma group that I used to run, where we started off the group each week with mountain pose from yoga before we actually got into, it was a psychoeducational group, but before we got into delving into kind of the materials. And it was just such a great way to be able to start off. And it was so brief. It didn't, just was a, kind of really fantastic way to get people into the moment and into their bodies. And ready to be paying attention.
Well, I mean, one more part, I want to go back for a moment to Larry's, awareness of stress, I would call it, or body reactivity. Since I teach a lot of students, that is one of the practices they need to do. And what is most helpful in my experience, if people keep a log without any judgment, they just write down, I held my breath here, I tightened my shoulders there, whatever I did, and just note those and how did it affect you. So you can give a little sheet, which we do. And then they do this for a whole week, and then they look back and look at the common themes. And that's a kind of reflexive work, which we sometimes not always do, and having the person actually log makes a giant difference for most. There's always one who you want to teach them not to log. But for most, it helps the awareness, and then they are really surprised. And I remember in a different way when we had a young woman, we wrote up as an article, who pulled her hair, trichomania. She did it about 800, literally almost 800 minutes a week. Unbelievable. But she was totally unaware of it. She had bald spots. She had been treated by many people. She did it as her own self-healing project. And then she finally started to chart how many minutes she did this, 800 minutes.
Yeah.
She was totally shocked. She had no awareness of this. And then you could ask, what's the benefit of doing that? And anybody who has done this, I mean, one of the benefits is when I do this, I interrupt my thought pattern. It's like a meditative practice. I sit there like this. I stop thinking for a moment. That was her own discovery. Then she realized she needed to learn some stress management because you can't stop pulling. You can only interrupt to do something different. And she literally she ended up by the end of 4 weeks pulling her hair less than 10 times a day, 10 minutes in total a week. So the logging, I think, is really great to do.
Wow. Eric and Larry, I really want to thank you too for such wonderful presentations. I personally feel grateful for that after a long day of teaching and facilitating workshops. It's really it makes such a difference because our compassion is not complete if it doesn't include ourselves. And we sometimes forget ourselves so easily. The second part I wanted to bring in is I really loved in both of your presentations the part of moving in and out of sync. And I think that it's also not only in our therapeutic encounters, but also the power of connection. I felt, although we're different times of the day, I felt that power of connection when we were in sync with each other's. Here in the power of community, some sense of connectedness. I do it in the workshops I facilitate too. And that reminded me of the research you were talking about, Larry, also that it's as a musician, yes, we know here in our research that hearts that beat together, that drum together, drumming together in sync, hearts beat together, literally. So hearts that beat together drums. And it's really that sense of being in sync. And we need, these times, we really need that sense of connectedness. We need a sense of community. And these experientials that you've done are very powerful in strengthening those secure connections and trust we need so much. So a rising tide lifts all boats. And yes, thank you.
John F. Kennedy.
Eleanor, you reminded me when we take the letter I in illness, and we substitute we get wellness. And in a humorous way, when you do this, if you look at the data on the immune function after vaccinations, this was done on flu vaccinations, those who have a supportive partner produce 10% more antibodies.
Wow.
And if you are angry and upset and depressed, you produce up to 80% less. So it's really critical for our optimum health to get recentered, as Larry guided us through, or use music or others.
That's very true as well for women who have experienced interpersonal violence.
Yes.
The most important healing factor is a support network.
Exactly.
And so, it's no accident that once we started doing group treatment and battered women shelter work with other people who have been through the same experience, that they began to heal. Whereas individual psychotherapy, people could go 2-3 years with even good therapists, but not resolve a lot of the trauma. So that's very important.
That is literally the crux of my dissertation.
All
Oh,
right.
yay.
I'm looking at relationships among sexual assault survivors in support groups for sexual trauma
Good.
and the power of the relationship among survivors as facilitative of their trauma healing.
You know, that brings up the idea, Brittany, of the effect of Zoom, because I used to lead support groups for women with breast cancer. And with David Spiegel at Stanford, and who found that women lived longer with support groups. And we certainly, if not longer, then that was disputed later, but the quality of life went up in so many ways. So what do you do? I actually have some friends now with breast cancer, just newly diagnosed. Can you get a support group together? Can you get an online support group? Does that work as well? And so I think all these techniques, I was so impressed listening to this, I guess, Larry, the attunement, because I forget that we're in different time zones when we're looking at a screen, which already does kind of funny things to your sense of orienting and tuning into other people who are, we were joking about it's morning, it's evening, it's, you know, when we've had a long day of work or we're just starting our days of work, and yet somehow we're finding ways to attune to each other on screen. And I think that's what's so important about what we're doing here, is showing some, demonstrating some, practicing some, so that we don't go through our days feeling so isolated when we're on Zoom.
It's interesting, in attunement, some of the research I looked at, slower breathing, you know, meditative breathing, raises vagal tone, or helps us regulate the movements from activity to rest, and synchronizes breathing with respiration. I mean, respiration with heart rate better. However, I saw this study that looked at somebody reading poetry. One group read poetry, the other group did meditation, and the other group breathed just normally. And the ones who read the poetry actually had a stronger, higher vagal tone. They were better able to be resilient under stress. And that speaks to what I try to teach, is that it's the way that we convey things to each other through our voice, through our bodies, that can actually be more powerful than a practice, even though practices are also good. But the practice, like in Zen meditation, actually this was compared to a Zen meditation, is that every moment is practice. And so how do we tune into that with our clients and with ourselves, so that just our speaking and being together is creating resilience to disease and to trauma? That's a way to figure out what is that rhythm in my voice when I'm talking, when I'm moving. It creates that kind of a synchrony that is actually changing my whole immune system.
Very interesting. You know, I've been doing workshops for a long time, but more recently, since we've been doing these group, merging our two groups with the roundtables, I find myself adding more exercises, short, brief exercises in my work than I ever did before. Normally I have 25,000 things I want to say, so I keep, you know, going faster and faster and faster. But when I slow down, I find I enjoy it more, and I hope the people that I'm working with do as well. I suspect they do. So I thank you. Those of you who are teaching us some of these activities are really quite helpful for me personally.
Thanks, Lenore. I want to add to that, you know, we learned this the last time we met, I think it was last week maybe, the importance of, because when we all get anxious if we have a slideshow and we start reading it, we become just a matter of information, and we go faster and faster. And it's all information, and we can't digest it. The body is an organic process. It really has to breathe, incorporate, digest, eliminate what's not useful, both ideas as well as food and matter. And we need time for that rhythmic process of intake, digestion, out. And if we don't do that, information becomes indigestible and we get sort of clogged with it. And by the end of the day, we have to discard it.
Can I make one suggestion? Because I'm at fault at this all the time. And most of us are, when we do at times therapy or teaching, because when we are there, we are so totally present that we forget how time flies. And yet on the other side, we tend to sit more. So I just recommend, just even for a moment, once more, all of us, because we are embodied, just get up for a moment and just be the tree. Eileen started with, just be the tree and really move with the storms, really move and reach up, really move. You can hear the wind just really move and rotate, and notice how hard it is to get up. So I would just, each of you, those who are still stuck in their chair, just get up anyway, just do it. Because we are, unless we do it ourselves, forget it. It is just only words. And I don't care what movement you do.
Eric, I see you in a big stadium giving motivational speaks.
Speech, yes. But now just let yourself sit. Let me show, I want to just show.
Eric, I have to tell you that while this presentation was going on, what the action that everybody missed was what was going on here with Giselle and I. We had a power outage. We lost total power while this was going on. Then the internet crashed. Then the printer, which hadn't been working, all of a sudden started spewing out papers, and we were busy trying to fix everything. And fortunately, the presentation went on, so we could hear everything, even though we were totally in another, doing two things at once.
Perfectly okay.
It was a complete hurricane in this.
It was amazing. And it was a storm that came up off the ocean from no place. It was
nice.
One of those weird things. You wanted to say something, I know.
Yes, I am grateful for your presentation. Really loved it. I do meditation every morning, and I did the meditation during your presentation. I felt so relaxed, and I've been thinking about how our embodiment with our patients, especially with the ones that have suffered trauma, and we need to be attuned with ourselves in order to help them calm down or activate them. Depends on how they are feeling and are processing their trauma. But the first impression of us, it's really important for patients. So if we are having this kind of presentations and we are having this kind of support, right, for all of us, it helps us realize that how important today our bodies are, and the way we our body language helps us and our patients to be in our office and process whatever they come to process in our therapy, right? So I'm really thankful for both of you. I love that.
It reminds me of the psychoeducation that trauma clients are often dissociative or anxious. However, they feel very comforted by knowing that these are natural processes that we go through to adapt under stress. And they will then talk about those experiences that they have that they've maybe felt ashamed of, that they didn't have control over their bodies or that they blanked out. And once they start to connect to that, they know that that's a rhythm and that accept that rhythm and you move with them in it. And a lot of synchrony and changes start to happen. The other pointer I have is that when working with clients and you want to help them connect in their bodies, try not to interpret what their bodies are doing. Try to leave open-ended. So, I mean, I see some therapists, they might say, did you notice you stopped breathing? It's much better to say, just experience what your breathing's like right now.
Mhm.
So you don't, because nobody actually really ever stops breathing. It's that the breathing is maybe tight a little bit somewhere and moving a little differently. And they need to have that experience on their own, because it tends to get you, like, keep you in your body. Otherwise, if somebody says you're not breathing, you think, oh no, I'm gonna, and so there's just a different language that goes with working with the body that's very explorative and inviting. And you don't know if somebody kicks their feet, whether they're angry or whether they want to go run away or whether they want to just feel some power in dancing. I mean, you don't know what the body's saying necessarily, even if you get good at it. And so it's nice to just speak in a way where they can just feel what's going on, feel what your leg is doing now, rather than interpret.
Well, it gives them power too. You're really
Yes.
empowering people to take charge of their own experience, and you're not being judgmental or pathologizing it, which is really important too. If you say to somebody, "Oh, you look stressed. You look very not relaxed," it can be shaming, and it's also the other way around. It used to be, I used to find it sad and frustrating to say to someone, relax. If they don't know, they would say, if I knew how to do it, I would do it. So teach me to do it. So that's the first part of the teaching is just the awareness. So you give people the power to track their own sensations, to modulate them as they want, not as you think is the better thing to do. But just that awareness is really empowering, that people then begin to feel. And one of the hallmarks of trauma too is the feeling of helplessness, or something terrible has been done that's out of your control. So to get people back in internal locus of control, and from there becomes a feeling of, if I can't control the world around me, but I control my arm, I can control something small, can begin to grow into more of a feeling of self-efficacy and control. So yes, it's really important to help people. The first step toward self-control is awareness. Without that, you can't begin to control.
Or speaking of awareness, I think relax is a terrible word. The dentist says to you, relax before he starts drilling.
Relax, I say relax. Yes.
I'd like to help the clients to discover that you can move out of all the trauma states into being connected to yourself and other people. It's not just about relaxing, because sometimes tensing or letting your body do something that it needs to be active, like Eric gets us up, that will bring the completion of some movement or some tension or some emotion. And then people come to center and they feel more expanded and open and connected to the world.
That's one of the things
I
I
want
love
to add.
about your exercise. When I had a different perspective when I did it, and you asked us to reflect on the year, I thought of grief and sadness, just like my own experiences, but also a collective experience that a lot of people have been going through. And so when you asked me to pinpoint a place in my body, my heart felt heavier. And then I was like moving in and out of that, when I envisioned myself like releasing that, and then my heart felt lighter. And it reminded me of like the grief work that I do with my clients, and how this is like a very somatic way for them to hold their pain and also empower them to understand that they can tolerate these painful feelings. And it just related a lot to what a lot of people said. So I thought it was a really awesome exercise to kind of put that psychoeducation in practice.
Yeah, I mean, the teaching is that eventually someone discovers that their body is really there to support everything that's going on and knows what to do. And that when you become a friend to where the pain is, there's movement and change and deepening and release and all the things that we want in life, in a sense, and joy and vitality comes from there as well.
It's
Guys, this is a fabulous discussion. I hate to wind us down, but I just looked at the time.
Yeah, it's
10 o'clock. I mean, end of session, 10 o'clock here.
So I want to just give us a quick little summary of how exciting this has been. We thank Eric and Larry for really sharing with us and getting us moving. You know, I'm not a mover, but I like moving.
Yeah, you're moving more now.
So that's good. That is good. And I'm sure it's good for everybody who's listening. We're hoping that we didn't mess up the recording, but we'll see how it goes. And I want to thank everybody for being with us and let you know what's happening next week. We're going to be talking about a topic that's really more serious, but one that I think we're going to be able to apply some of what we've been learning, and that's on some of the high reports of high level of suicide amongst our youth during COVID. And so we have Dr. Patricia Villavicencio, who is here, who is going to lead us in a discussion. She works with adolescents in Madrid in the public hospital there, and will help lead the discussion. And we have Dr. Patricia O'Gorman, who is also a psychologist who has been writing blogs for Psychology Today. I want to give us a little plug. Our larger COVID group, you know, we're two of the smaller working groups, but we have a very large group with about 90 people or so that are working in different areas. And one of the areas is to be posting a blog on Psychology Today. And I'll post the actual blog, the way you can come and look at the blog there. On Psychology Today about some of the things that they've been working with in COVID. So that's going to be a very exciting presentation next week as well. And I hope everybody comes and joins into the discussion, because I think it's really a big topic that we have to deal with. We just don't have a lot of eyes on children during COVID when they're not in school. And developmentally, we're not allowing them to develop the way they need to develop. And so we'll try to see if we can see what we can help do in that area. After that, we're going to do great presentations. I think Dr. Pardis is going to do a presentation on compassion fatigue. Do we really get very tired ourselves, and how can we prevent that from all the giving that we're doing? How do we keep refreshing and re-energizing ourselves? We're going to get to Valentine's Day coming up, and we're going to have a Valentine's Day surprise. We're going to try to put out lots of love. Creativity is going to be another topic we're going to work on. And we're going to talk about the vaccine. Who's gotten it and how is it working? Is it working? Does it change our life? So these are some of the upcoming topics, and some of people are going to stay online so that we can talk about how to get information out and get us all on the same page as we move into the spring. You know, I guess we still have winter a little bit, but it's getting.
The sap is rising.
That's right. The sap is rising, and the days are getting longer. So that's always a good sign for me. I like the light, and I resonate to the light. So that's good for us all to know. So I thank everybody for being with us and putting up with some of our technical issues. I live at the beach, and unfortunately that's a problem, but I'm willing to put up with the problem to have the ocean right in my backyard. So with that, I say so long for today, and we'll all be in touch.